You're listening to A Little Too Quiet, the Ferndale Library podcast. It's brought to you by the Friends of the Ferndale Library. I am one of your hosts, Jeff, here today, and I'll have an interview with a local author coming up in this episode. Kelly J. Baptist is published author of books for middle grade readers, young adults, as well as picture books for young readers. And one of Kelly's most recent books, Ebb and Flow, was selected amongst 5 other titles for this year's Battle of the Books, which is an annual trivia-style tournament that our youth librarians coordinate for the 5th graders at Ferndale Upper Elementary. And there is a lot of enthusiasm around this each year, particularly this year. 5th graders form teams and they read 6 books, and then they prepare for battle in which, as teams, they will compete to answer trivia questions that are based around the plot points or characters or themes or any element from the books that they have just read. And the winners get their name, their team name that is, on a plaque. It's very exciting. There's a lot of great energy around it. And best of all, it encourages kids to read. We love to see that. Ebb and Flow is a book that came out recently from Kelly J. Baptist, who was born and raised in Detroit and then went off to live in other parts around the country, Alabama, Florida, but then came back up here to Michigan and currently lives over there on the southwest side near Benton Harbor, and is now a full-time writer, award-winning author who won a contest, as she'll discuss, back in 2015, which got her the chance to have one of her short stories published in an anthology amongst great company like Kwame Alexander and Jacqueline Woodson, and just esteemed authors who have been writing for young adult audiences for a while. Kelly J. Baptist, as I said, born here in Michigan and has an amazing story, has been writing her entire life, basically. Now, a novel in verse is a type of narrative fiction where the story is told entirely through poetry, but it doesn't have to have like a set meter or particular rhythm or even have to rhyme. It can be lyrical, it can be heavy on imagery, it can have a very energized, of course, rhythmic meter to it, but it's just an awesome and kind of invigorating way not only to write a story, but to actually experience a story. Ebb and Flow is a novel for middle grade readers, and it is set over the course of 2 7th graders' duration of suspensions. They are both suspended for being in a fight. The narrative is from first person, but bounces between the 2 main characters, Ebb, Ebony, and Dakari, who wants to be known as Flo. And this is about the 2 characters who are able to eventually see the world with a fresh perspective because they actually wind up developing a sense of empathy for one another's experiences. They're could be distinct from each other's experiences, but they might also have a lot of similarities, whether or not they know it or not. And Kelly J. Baptist, as she says in this interview, is drawing from past experience, having worked in a school district, which she speaks very poignantly about. She also speaks very poignantly about how you become a writer, and that really starts with reading. Let's get right into this interview with Kelly J. Baptist, author of Ebb and Flow and so many other books. We'll have a link to her website in the show notes and more information, too, about Battle of the Books, which is coming up on March 18th. If you're a 5th grader, you have that marked on your calendar. If you're a parent or caregiver in the area who has a 5th grader in the schools, you have that marked on your calendar. We're very excited about it. There's more information on our website, of course. All right, here's our interview. Who have maybe heard some of your book titles, but maybe want to know more of your story and how you got started in writing. I know it started when you were very young. Can you talk about getting the inspiration to become a lifelong writer and how that happened?
Yeah, sure. I think it really started with being read to. You know, when I kind of trace it back, story was always a part of my life. Mm-hmm. I like to tell the story of my mother reading to us at nap time, and I hated naps. So I'm always fighting to stay awake. Like I am not going to sleep. I hate naps to this day, actually. That's interesting. I'd rather just go to bed early.
Me too, actually.
So yeah, the nap just does not work out. But I remember fighting to stay awake, and the way that she would read, just her expressions and just the soothing lilt of her voice, it was undeniable. I would always fall asleep and wake up like, what happened? What happened to my plan? What did I miss? So I think experiencing the power of language at an early age, it just made a connection.
Yeah.
You know, for some people it's sports, cooking, music, you know, we all kind of connect to something. And I think for me, it just was always words. So being read to, and then learning how to read for myself, going to the library, and the freedom to select what I wanted, and coming out with the max number of books. I remember, where were we living? This is when I was an adult, and it might be West Palm Beach.
Okay.
Or Pensacola, one of them, where there was no limit to how many books you could check out of the library. And I was just like, this is heaven. So it was transitions, being read to, reading for myself, feeling all the feelings that books were giving me, and then saying, you know what, I wonder if I could duplicate this on the page. For myself. And so then starting to write myself.
Yeah. I imagine, I'm guessing when your mother was giving you story times, that if there was a character on the page, maybe she would just change her voice a little bit, a little theatricality to it, maybe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If there were scary parts, then her voice captured that. And I'd be like, oh my goodness. I remember this book about a collie and a cougar.
Yes.
And I got it for her a few years ago as it's like a throwback. But I just remember the foreshadowing and foreboding that would enter her voice anytime the cougar was coming on page. And so just all of that, I think, weighed heavily upon me. There's some turning point moments that I remember, is her taking us to see A Raisin in the Sun, our town's production of it. And I was mesmerized. Just absolutely mesmerized. Like, they are bringing words to life right in front of me. There's a kid who's my age who's acting on that stage, and they're really eating the eggs on the stage. Like, all of that was fascinating to me. And I came home and wrote my first copycat play. No idea about play structure or format, but I knew it was different than a novel. How did I know? I don't know. But it was just something that I felt, and so that's what I wrote. Then being allowed to write the Christmas play for my school when I was in 7th grade. So just a lot of exposure and empowerment, I would say, allowed me to continue like, oh my goodness, I wrote the play for the school, and we cast our classmates and held our own rehearsals and figured out. We had a lot of empowerment at the school I was at for elementary and middle. Ran our rehearsals and performed for the church, the community, our families, school community. So that was huge as well for me.
Talk about, because I'm just guessing here, talk about a lot more of the influence that you might have been drawing, not only from your mother's performance in Storytime or the play, or even just what it seems to be a very positive experience in school. That seems to be perhaps one of the routes that takes you into not just picture book writing, but also then writing for younger audiences. It just seems like you had such a kind of potentially magical, formative experience in your younger years, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that at the time I wasn't thinking of it in that way. I'm just a kid living, and everything felt normal. But looking back on it now as an adult, you know, I had a lot of really cool opportunities. And again, empowerment. You know, if we were doing a school program, Kelly, can you do a poem? I write a poem and recite it for the program. So just things like that kind of gave me the foundation for writing as I continued on.
Right.
That being said, though, it was never suggested or pushed that you should be an author. Like, that was never a thing. So I just figured, okay, I've worn glasses since I was about 8 years old, always going to be a part of my life. And I figured the same for writing. I love writing. I'll always do it. I never thought when I grow up, I'm going to be an author. I thought, hey, I'll enter things here and there, maybe get money from this scholarship or this essay contest and things of that, this poetry contest. But it was never a thought in my mind to be an author. And so for me, that is the biggest, I won't say regret, but the biggest, wish that I could have added to my experience is a way to connect that to adulthood and career. So now when I talk to young people or go on school visits, I am very candid with them about what that career looks like and the potential. If a kid asks the money question, I don't shy away from it. I'm going to tell you because that's something I would have loved to know at a younger age. Like, oh, you can make money, you can survive, you can live off of being an author. Yes, it takes work, but so does everything.
Right.
If it's your passion, it's work that is worth doing. So, I am very, very much serious about sharing that when I speak with other people.
Oh, I think that's wonderful. I mean, we can all get inspiration and say, oh yeah, I can do this. I can go home and write. But you're connecting the dots of how do I get from here to there? How do I actually get my photo on the inner flap of a back of a book?
Yes.
How do you actually get there? But also that age, these ages, be it YA or middle grade, there's so much potential to spark the inspiration. Is that perhaps partly why you write to those audiences? Because you know how they could be just kind of activated, right?
Yeah. It definitely is now. But that is not how it began.
Okay.
As a teenager and even young adult, I think just how kids tend to read up. That's how I was writing. I was writing about things I hadn't experienced yet, like, which is crazy. I got to find this notebook. I think I was in college, maybe a freshman and sophomore. And I'm writing about this woman who used to be a pianist, and she's kind of delayed her dreams and, denied herself for her family. And I'm young, no family, no nothing, writing about these ideas. So I definitely wrote older, until I was a parent myself. My oldest daughter was, probably between 1 and 2. And she asked me to read If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. So I read it and can you read it again? Like this book just over and over and over. And I'm like, I'm really tired of this book, but I also love this experience because she's close and, I'm doing what my mother did. So connecting the dots there. And that is when I was like, what if I wrote for a younger audience? And that's what did it.
Yeah. Talk about just in general what it meant for you to not only get this honor through the We Need Diverse books, but then to get your name in the mix on flying lessons with folks like Kwame Alexander and Matt De La Pena and Jacqueline Woodson. What was that like for you?
It was very surreal. Yeah. And I don't even know upon entering the contest if I was aware that it was the winner would be a part of an anthology. I would probably have to really think and see, did I know that? I just knew it was a contest. I was pretty used to entering contests. It, as a habit since being a kid, really, just the prospect of winning something. So it was just something on my list. And I don't know. I definitely did not know the names who would be attached. Yeah. Then finding that out, extremely surreal. These are authors that I grew up reading. I remember going to the library and getting everything Walter D. Myers and Jacqueline Woodson and Matt De La Pena. And his story was the first one I read in the book when I received my copies. I said, I'm going to read it in order. So his story is number 1. I read his story. I closed the book and I put it down. And I was just like, I don't know how I'm in this book. It was just the strength of his words. He's a marvelous storyteller, obviously. And I just started to get nervous. And then I kept going. I think Grace Lynn was next. Meg Medina, and my story is number 5. So I kept going, and like the feeling of dread was increasing because it's like, why is my story in here? And to help with that, I told myself, read this like you didn't write it. Read it like you've never seen it before, like you're just a regular person. Detach from it, in essence.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. And I got to the end and I was like, that's pretty good. Okay, it's in here. It surely is in here. And so, the imposter syndrome moment, what they say, but the work, and I know the years that I've been writing and improving and getting no's and taking classes and researching things and all of that. I know all of that went into it. And so, very surreal moment was full circle with Walter Dean Myers because grew up reading him, was awarded a fellowship to study his work at the Curlin Collection in Minnesota. Met him a few years after that, and then end up in an anthology with him. Was just phenomenal. I couldn't even express, like, is this for real? Mm-hmm. So yeah, definitely an honor.
And from there on, I mean, you probably tell the kids this all the time. From then on, if you're just looking chronologically in your in your biography, it looks like, okay, and the rest is history because she just keeps publishing books from then. But there's always just so much work that goes into it. Yes. We can't overlook that.
Yeah, you're right.
But talk more about, because we're going to get to Ebb and Flow, of course, but talk a bit more about your next few books. We have Isaiah Dunn, and we have Swag in the Socks. We have Xavier. We have these characters. And I'm wondering if you could also kind of speak a bit about your experience briefly, like working in a school district, and whether or not you were kind of, your interaction with kids at that point maybe informed a little bit about what you're writing, because a lot of those, a couple of those early books really seem to be, I don't know, kind of orbiting this theme of like instilling a bit of self-confidence for the kids. Can you talk a bit about those early books?
Yeah, sure. So Isaiah is a continuation of that short story that won the We Need Diverse Books contest. And I didn't know that that's what was going to happen. It's a weird, like, my whole journey is not a straight line. I don't think many people's is, but mine is circles all over the place and all kind of squiggly lines if you were an artist to plot it out. So I started writing Isaiah's story probably in 2011, just thinking about the issue of homelessness. And it was going a whole different direction. And when it came time for the contest, I wrote something completely different, a different short story. And I was just like, this is not working. And so then I went back to look at the 50 or so pages I had of this Isaiah Dunn character. And I was like, well, let me condense this and kind of maybe I could turn this into a short story for this contest. So Isaiah went from maybe 56 pages to 10, 11, 12 for the contest, however many pages, however many words. And then the decision to continue his story was like he went from this to this, back to this, but in a different way. So it was a journey really to get that story told. And once my character Isaiah started talking, and it's like he didn't stop. So then we have the sequel to Isaiah Dunn is My Hero, which is Isaiah Dunn Saves the Day. You mentioned the Swag is in the Socks. That comes from my love of funky, crazy socks. I just got into it where I don't even think I have plain white socks anymore. They're all crazy. What do I have one today? We're going to show our socks. Oh yeah, I love those. Yeah. The smiley faces.
Yeah, sure.
Let's see. So, mine say read. I don't know if I can lift my leg. Yeah. Oh.
Nice. It's an
I cannot lift my leg down. I was like, I have no space in this closet.
It's an audio medium, but I assure you, everyone at home, we are wearing great socks. All right.
This one really, the self-confidence is a big theme in this story, as well as family, extended family, kinship care, that type of thing. Finding your special spark or your gifting. It doesn't have to be like anyone else's. Your swag is your swag. So those were kind of the themes in that story. And especially with Ebb and Flow, you are right. I think my time working in the school district definitely influenced how I wrote. With the Isaiah books, I wasn't in the school system yet.
Okay, sure.
When I was writing Isaiah, but it was just a feeling. A lot of times I just feel or have the gift to just know and have a great finger on the pulse of middle school experience and kids who are in that sweet spot area, just in between. I'm a middle child, so it could be that.
Yeah.
Could be that. I'm very acquainted with what it's like.
Sure.
to be in the middle of things, to be a big sister and a younger sister, to try to be the mediator of things and a peacemaker also. So I think I'm pulling from all of those experiences. And while my elementary middle school experience was not it wasn't conventional. It was not the norm. Definitely was not. I think I pulled from a lot of those experiences too. But definitely for Ebb and Flow, by the time I was writing that, I was working in the middle school. And the famous story associated with that is that I started writing Ebb and Flow on a Saturday in February. And first words, I don't hit girls. I don't even hit girls. And that story just kind of started to flow from my hand in free verse, which I had never done before, never would have considered ever. Didn't even like that genre of writing at first. I was like, what is this? This is so weird. And
Well, I have to interrupt and just say, wow, because it seemed like it came so naturally to you. It seemed like you had been ready for it. That's amazing. Because the book
came naturally once I started,
yeah,
but that was not the intention. I still have the notebooks because I wrote that by hand first and then typed it. And I just noticed I was stopping in the middle of the page. I was like, I don't even know why I'm doing this, but it feels right. So we're just going to continue. Then the dual perspective.
Yeah.
So Saturday, wrote those words, worked on it, over the weekend, brought my notebook to school on Monday. And, wouldn't you know, there was a fight that morning in my school. And so I worked in the guidance office, the social emotional learning interventionist. So if a fight happens, you're gonna be talking to me before you go to the dean, or it just depends on how who's available. And so I happened to be in the hall, heard it on my walkie-talkie. I walked back to the stairs because I'm like, they're gonna send kids down, or kids are gonna be coming down. And so one of the individuals involved in the fight was a young man, and he came down first. And he's yelling, he's upset, like he's kind of emotional, an angry emotional kind of thing. And I'm like, you good? Calm down. It's gonna be all right. And I'm walking with him down this long, long hallway to the guidance suite. I'm like, just calm down. It's gonna be all right. You're all right. You're okay. And then he said the words. He was like, I don't even hit girls. And I was just like, wait a second. What did he just say? And it turned out he was in a fight with a girl. Now, I didn't plan this. And I am not lying, because I had my notebook with me and I ran to get it. And then I showed the dean. I was like, he just said he don't even, I wrote this. And so I went and sat in my office and just kind of sat. Like, this is incredible. And it was confirmation to me that it was a story that needed to be told. And so now I'm like, I need to write about millionaires next. I feel like that that needs to happen. And then it can unfold in real life a few days later. Maybe that's where I'm going wrong with things.
Ebb and Flow, and that is notably a book that here in the Ferndale School District we have selected for Battle of the Books. So the fifth graders here are reading it currently amongst a selection of 5 other books, which is very exciting. Nice. It is about Dakari, who wants to be known as Flo, and Ebony. Yep. And they do get into a fight, and then they are suspended. And I love what's going on here. Ebb, flow, give, take, 2 sides, back and forth. It's amazing stuff. But wow, I mean, 7th grade. This book really helped drive home for me that more than any other year, it's one of the most difficult, awkward, confusing, maybe angry years that we all go through as children. I remember having that vague feeling of like the transition of 6th to 7th for some reason was like, oh, do I have to start acting like a grown-up now, like more tough now, like more complete now, even more so than 9th grade. Kelly. 7th grade was somehow just so difficult. But
the middle can be difficult.
I know.
It's a tough position sometimes.
Yeah. So I guess talk more about developing those 2 voices and having them go back and forth. And how this story really winds up cultivating like a deep sense of empathy for other, the cliche is there because this book also centers around shoes, another person's shoes, talk a bit about that.
Yeah, I think for sure when I'm writing, I'm not really thinking that critically. I kind of save that to the editing phase. But to your point of making their voices distinct and unique, I knew that was going to be important. And it is a juggling or a balancing act, I'll say, because a main theme I wanted to highlight was their similarities as well. So that as a reader, you're seeing, oh my goodness, he's eating pizza, you're eating pizza, she's eating pizza. Like, you guys are a lot more alike than you think. You know, you have a big brother, you have a big cousin, you have younger siblings, you have younger siblings, you know, so just to kind of draw those parallels while also making sure that they were unique. So Ebony, I just saw her as, you know, more fiery than Flo. And Flo, I gave him the whole water, and he likes to swim because water is usually associated with calmness and peace. And so I knew that he was going to take on more of that role, although they both could get riled up. And then I wanted to explore why. Why are they feeling? Why are they reacting the way that they do? They have this big similarity, this huge thing in common with their dads. And I feel like I kind of lead you along to imagine the stereotype, and then flip even that. So as a reader, you know, authors sometimes manipulate a little bit. Sometimes you know what your reader might be thinking. And I love to do the exact opposite of what you might be thinking.
Sure.
Or kind of really play with roles or expectations and kind of flip them in slight ways. I think that leads to what you mentioned before, empathy and understanding for other people. My biggest thing is take the time to see the story behind someone's story. Yes, you might be loud. Yes, you might be quiet. Yes, you might always have headphones on, or whatever it is that you do. But there's a reason. There's a reason. And if we took time to kind of understand that, or even just acknowledge that there is a reason, I think that changes our interaction.
Oh, yeah.
So that I saw that in my school all the time. Like, people would fly off the handle just like that. Like, did you consider it was an accident that she bumped into you? Did you consider that he didn't have breakfast this morning? Did you consider that, you know, anything, a family member passed away? And if we just take that extra step of understanding, situations would diffuse much quicker and they might not even happen at all.
Yeah.
So kind of having that in mind, wanting the reader has to be able to determine who is who without the subtitle of whose chapter it was. And so I definitely had to be aware of that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Totally relatable characters. And from the get-go, the characters on the page are at odds, and they are not thinking too kindly of each other, and they also are trying to put out the tough surface. But as the book goes on, you start to see that they have soft sides too, and I love that.
Yeah. Because everyone does.
Yeah, no, of course.
Everyone does, and sometimes in certain environments you have to hide it. Because you've learned a protective strategy, like, I can't show weakness in this area or perceived weakness in this area.
Yeah.
I couldn't cry even though I want to, you know, in this situation, or I'm going to look bad in front of everybody. And everybody is doing this all the time with their phone. Yeah. So you know, it's so much. It's so much that goes into that whole experience as a young person today.
Yeah.
With all of the advances and stuff that we have. So I was thinking all of that.
Oh, yeah. And then just talk a little bit more about the rhythm of this book. And I almost wondered, well, actually, maybe slightly tie into the latest book, The Band in Our Basement. I was curious about just music in general in your life and how much influence you draw from that, because there is such a good rhythm to the verse of this book, Ebb and Flow. And I know that you'd written poetry in your past, and all your life you've probably written poetry. You probably were drawing on that too. Were you also drawing on music and anything else, or even just slam poetry? Tell us more about Ebb and Flow and the rhythm.
You know, rhythm music is in my blood. I'm born in Detroit. My mother is born in Detroit. My father, part of the Great Migration from Georgia. And that's how they met in the city. So growing up, Motown classics, gospel music was always a big part of my experience. We had a record player in our room growing up, and so we listened to records. And then transitioned to cassettes and CDs and then MP3 and on streaming now. It's just so easy. So, yeah, I'm very musical, and I think that is what influences the structure and the flow for one, the poetry in Isaiah Dunn. I thought that was a cool way to connect with my poetry roots. And I never made the connection to a novel in verse as being poetry. Up until a long time, I thought poetry had to rhyme. So, I was probably pretty older, teenager, adult, maybe, to be like, it does not have to rhyme.
Right.
So the idea of being able to do ebb and flow in the format that I did was a lot of fun. And so my next book is going to also be a novel in verse. I just really enjoyed that structure. And then with Band, for it to be a rhyming picture book, that just kind of took me back to moments again of being read to, as well as reading to my kids when they were young. You find that picture book that you're picking as a parent because you want to read it to the kid and not the other way around. And so that was my vision and my goal for The Band in Our Basement, for it to be, just a lyrical experience. My illustrator, fantastic, Janine Mohammed, who did the illustrations. You just get all the feels of a late night adventure, the coolness of the dark bedroom, the warmth of the hot and loud basement. I think she was phenomenal in bringing that to life through pictures.
Yeah, a sense of discovery, sparking inspiration again, and then just a little bit more about the experience of writing Ebb and Flow, because we should note that You might be thinking, oh, ebb and flow, it's going to split narratives. Is it like an ebb chapter and a flow chapter? No, they are bouncing off each other several times on one page. Even the voices are changing to such a point where it kind of reaches a fever pitch with the penultimate chapter, Midnight Again. It gets visceral and intense and invigorating to read. What was it like to write that way, to bounce back and forth like that?
Okay, so this is like behind the scenes author adventure moment. So I kind of knew I wanted to do something like that in the end of the book. So it's kind of one of those things where you have the destination in mind, but you really don't know how you're going to get there. And the book just wrote itself as I wrote it, if that makes sense. Like I didn't have an outline. I didn't really know, just vague things that were going to happen in day 1, 2, 3, 4. But I knew I wanted to do something that was a little fantastical at the end. And I wanted to incorporate Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday and the celebration of his birthday with the dream.
The dream.
So, and I didn't even know how it was going to be. I just had an idea. And then when I got to it, I was like, oh, I'm here. Okay, so now it's time to do it. And I just thought, we spent the whole book flow, 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 ebb, flow, flow, ebb, back and forth between the two of them. I think I was thinking about it visually, like if I saw this on screen, and maybe it's a split screen or, where we're seeing them simultaneously at the same time. And that's how I wanted to write it. And I had the vision for the audio. So if you haven't listened to the audiobook, those narrators, phenomenal. Went through and highlighted who I wanted to say what part, and they just did an amazing job bringing that to life. Just the intensity, the urgency of it, the building of it, the climax. I was very pleased about that. And so that's what I was going for, to see that what started off as maybe something we didn't think was a big deal, could spiral into something way beyond what either of them intended. Like, okay, this is out of control now. I might have just wanted him to get scared, or I might have wanted her to just be quiet and stop riling things up. But now we're in this point where our family's involved, maybe community members are involved, and it's just beyond our reach. And that's how quickly and how easily things can happen. If you forest fires and things like that. It could just be because someone threw a cigarette out the window or didn't stamp the fire out all the way. And so the same with our emotions and our
Yes.
reactions sometimes.
Yes. Yes. That might even be already leading into the beginning of the answer to the question of something a bit vague and overarching, like let's say a fifth or sixth or seventh grader is reading this. They may not be listening to this podcast, but if you put it out into the ether, what do you hope they take away from a book like Ebb and Flow? What do you think? What do you hope sticks with them from what you wrote?
Again, the paying attention to the story behind the story. I don't know, just really thinking before you act and taking the time to process. I think that's a big thing that we dealt with in the middle school. And I think it's a big thing we're seeing across the board with young people and adults not able to self-regulate. Yeah, so there's that aspect of it. It takes a lot of maturity to be able to look past your own self and look at somebody else's experience.
Yeah.
And to consider that. It takes a lot of maturity.
Yeah.
I think also the idea, and this is true for Isaiah Dunn and that series too, that true hero work might not mean a fairy tale ending. So the scene in Ebb and Flow where Ebb sees the book from the Little Rock Nine, Elizabeth Eckford, and that iconic picture of her in a sea of yelling and screaming, angry, upset faces, and she's got sunglasses, and she's she might appear strong, but you can also see and sense the fear. That was a book I had in my office, and then to be able to flip and see other pictures in that book of how the two of those women were able to come together years later, I think 40 years later or something like that. And it was a new picture of the two of them. And so I had two of my students, two female students who had gotten into a fight. They got suspended and they came back and they had to have a meeting with me before or at some point, upon return. And I had them in my office and I showed them the picture of the book. The first picture of the anger, the fear, the uncertainty, the brutality of the situation. And then I opened the book and showed them the other picture. And I said, my expectation is not that you guys are now best friends. That is not the expectation. But the expectation is that you would treat each other with respect. You don't have to sit by each other. You don't have to necessarily talk to each other, but we're not going to talk about each other, and we're not going to prod and instigate something else. And I believe they were sixth graders at the time. So now they're asking questions. Were they friends? I wouldn't say they're friends. They came together and maybe they were able to reconcile. I don't know that they were going out to eat after this or talking on the phone all the time, but they recognized the wrongs from before and maybe had just a conversation. I don't know. I don't know the details of that. So for you two, you got to be in school with each other probably for 6 more years.
Right.
And so while you don't have to be best friends, and we're not going to make you hold hands, and I'm not going to make you apologize if you're not sorry. But what the expectation is for you to respect each other as you move forward. Yeah. And so that scene, I guess I'm probably a little bit of Mrs. Rashad. That's probably me in my role at my school. And so I'm trying to remember your original question because I just went off on that tangent, but just the idea of respect for other people, I think changes the equation. I said, and I would tell my students this, if we injected kindness and respect, just those two things, and incorporated that into everything we do throughout the day, how do you think your school building would be? How would your classroom be? How would your house be if everyone was committed to just two things, kindness and respect?
Yeah.
So
that's it.
That's what I would point out too. That's what I would want you to walk away with.
I have one more question for you.
Okay.
4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade. I mean, as soon as any student in school is able to write, because I remember being in school and we would have time to just do creative writing. As soon as you can write a full page, you're like, some students at least will get the bug of like, oh, I wrote one page. I want to write a whole book. They get the inklings of those little inspirations. So you've probably been asked this before, but like when you encounter young folk who think they want to be a writer, aside from like the career side of it, but maybe just like the work aspect, do you have advice that you like to give very young people who may want to be a writer one day?
I think it follows my journey really. So I'd start off by saying read as much as you can. If you want to learn how to write or to be a better writer, you don't have to necessarily take a class. I think reading a book is education that you don't even realize. You're taking in so much by reading a book, how dialogue is set up. Even, I tab for a paragraph or I use quotation marks. I'm talking about the youngest, of writers who are starting out. How sentences flow together, where every sentence is not going to be a long compound, but you're mixing sentence types. All of that you're learning from reading a book. You're subconsciously taking it in so that when you sit down, you kind of naturally remember it should look like this. And like I said, with writing a play before, I didn't have any training on that. But I knew this is not like a novel. We got to know who's talking. So I'm going to set it up like this. And those things come out the more you expose yourself to literature. So I say read as much as you can, especially on topics that mean a lot to you. If you like basketball, if you like baking, if you are into fossils and rocks, you like nonfiction, read a lot of that and it is going to definitely help your writing.
Yeah.
And then in order to be a writer, writers have to write. So push past some of those moments that might be like intimidating to see a blank sheet of paper or a blank page. All that is a blank opportunity for you to put magic on.
Yes.
So don't be intimidated by that. And even as adults, we can still get intimidated. Like, I know what I have to do. Oh my goodness. Am I going to, but as soon as I sit down, open the tab, read what I have. Oh, I'm back in it. So sometimes it's just that effort of sitting down and starting.
Yes.
So I definitely say that. And of course I got to say enter contests. There's a lot of, writing competitions for young people, or even at the local level, your library, like in Isaiah Dunn, I created that library contest, or your school might do something, your community. I would say get used to the process of having to prepare work and present it, the nervousness that comes with that, the wondering, are they going to like it? Is it good enough? The getting feedback, getting no's, all of that. Start getting used to those feelings at a young age and see how you can grow from those things. It happens in every industry. So why not with writing? A basketball player doesn't make every single shot that they take, and they keep playing and they keep practicing.
Yeah.
Same with writing. I like sports a lot. So I like to merge those metaphors over as well. So those are three big ones that I would say.
Excellent. And the Band in Our Basement came out in November, and you already hinted that you're working on something new.
Yes. A novel in verse. I think it would probably be classified as upper middle grade. Okay. So just a little older. And when is that? I think 2027.
Okay.
Is what we would be looking at for that one. I have another picture book coming out next year.
Excellent.
As well. So I try to keep it going. Yeah. Try to stay in the lab and keep it going, because this is years and years in the making. I think what sometimes I forget and what maybe other people don't understand is, decades. I've spent decades just writing because, not for any intention really, or just, hey, I want to write a story. Like that was my entertainment. As a young, I want to write a story. And so now that I've been given this opportunity for it to be my life's work or my career, I'm going to write the story. I'm going to write all the stories. So yes, that is where I am.
Oh. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us on our podcast today. It's been a pleasure.
It's my pleasure. Yeah. The pleasure is all mine. This has been fantastic.
And that was our interview with Kelly J. Baptist. Kelly is write.com. I will spell that out in our show notes, of course, and we'll have more information about Battle of the Books, more information about Ebb and Flow, and so many other of Kelly's books too. We really appreciate the chance to talk with her, a local author. So great to hear from her. So, thank you at home for listening to another episode of A Little Too Quiet. It's the Ferndale Library Podcast, and it is brought to you by the Friends of the Ferndale Library. If you want to find out more information about supporting this podcast, you can go to ferndalefriends.org, or leave us a review, or give us a rating, or subscribe to us, or just tell your friends about us. We will be back next week, as we always are, with more. Thank you so much for listening.